you want wisdom, look into God's word and we'll gain wisdom.
Absolutely. God is not going to get upset if we have questions. God's going to get upset if we completely rebel against him.
Like I said, if you go to question God, God knows our hearts.
Yeah.
He knows if you're going for more information, if you're going for like a rebellious type of thing.
Absolutely. God already knows it anyways. We might as well go ask the question. Go ahead, Stephen.
One more thing is, a lot of people have gone to God questioning in rebellion, and they've searched the scriptures and been converted. So
Yeah.
I think the final answer is ask for whatever reason, but listen to the answers.
Truth is not afraid to be questioned, right? If you have the truth, you're not afraid to be questioned because truth is truth no matter what. If you don't have truth, that's when you're scared to be questioned.
It seems like there in chapter 2:1 that he is not only waiting for God to answer, but he's also contemplating how he's going to react depending on the answer that he receives. I mean, again, pre-planning his response.
Yeah, because he says in chapter 2, verse 1, how I may reply when I am reproved. Habakkuk understands his relationship with God. God is God, I am not. He has all wisdom. I just don't understand it. And when God tells it to me, I'm just going to listen. I'm going to figure it out then. And we'll get into that more, hopefully today, maybe not. Okay, so we got her thing up. I hate putting my back to you, but I can't see without doing that. So, some dates of biblical nations. I think this is just important to put Habakkuk in his place. So we have northern Israel. These are the dates that I'll never ever remember. I'm sure you won't either. Southern Judah, these dates. Remember we talked about Assyria with Nahum, and they fell in 612. Babylon is the one we're going to talk about now. It's 612 to 539. In this time, Judah is going to fall, close to this. Habakkuk falls right here, between 612 and 609. That's what we talked about last time. After the Babylonians, we have the Medo-Persians, then we have the Greeks, then we have the Romans. So this is kind of important for us to get this in the right time frame to understand this. Where is Israel at this point? They're gone, right? That country is gone. Assyria has taken them. They don't even exist anymore. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. Important dates. So we have the kingdom divides up here. We have Samaria falls. That's with the Assyrian captivity. Nineveh falls. We talked about that with Nahum, how they are finished. And now we have Habakkuk right here. 605, first captives leave into Babylonian captivity. That's Daniel and those guys. 597, Jerusalem is captured. 587, 586, depends on who you talk to. Jerusalem and the temple are destroyed. The land is barren for 50 years after that happens. Who's Nebuchadnezzar? King of who? Babylon, right? He's king of Babylon, pretty wicked guy. He eventually dies, then Babylon falls, and then King Cyrus of Persia allows the remnants to return. And the further we go into the minor prophets, we're going to get into the remnant return. So that's kind of where we're at. Kings of Judah around the time of Habakkuk, Josiah. Good king or bad king? Mostly good. I kind of gave us a little cheat sheet down here. Green is good. He was the son of Ammon. Ammon was very wicked. Jehoahaz, he was the son of Josiah. He ruled for 3 months. He was wicked. How about Jehoiakim? Very wicked. Absolutely. So we can see these fellas. So Habakkuk could have seen the good and the bad that was happening. He definitely saw the bad, right? We talked about that last week in verses 1 through 4. Can't remember if I have any more slides or not. Last week, Steve said, you never flipped the thing one time. I said, I'm going to flip the thing this time. Okay, so this is Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar. This is kind of the area we're talking about, this huge area right here. What does that look like from last minor prophet?
Getting smaller?
What country did that look like? Assyria. Basically Assyria. They conquered Assyria. But when the Medes and the Babylonians conquered the Assyrians, they also went this way. You can see the Medo-Persians over here. So the Babylonians took this area, the Medo-Persians took this area, and eventually the Medo-Persians are going to take all of this. That is my 2-minute world history lesson, about as much as I know. I mean, I'm definitely not a world historian, but I'm trying to get a little bit better with these things. And I have one more, I think. Okay, I just put the city of Babylon here just so that we can get an idea. Very well fortified, just like Nineveh. You have all these moats They said the wall was 85 feet thick. Wonderful place they thought they were never going to fall. Just like all those who are arrogant who think they are never ever going to fall. But they do. Every single time. Okay.
The local river was involved in the fall of Nineveh and in the fall of Babylon also.
Absolutely. The river, go ahead and say how the Babylon, they diverted it, correct? If I'm not mistaken. They diverted the river to flood it.
They thought they couldn't be conquered, and they had a big party that lasted for a while and weren't paying attention, and they got conquered.
They got conquered. But arrogance is the downfall of a lot of people, right? Including us. Okay, anybody want to add anything to that? Okay, let's go to Habakkuk. Someone just read 1 through 4. I know we read this last week, but I just kind of want to get us caught up to where we are, and then we're going to get rolling in verses 5 through 11. Someone read verses 1 through 4 of Habakkuk 1, please.
The burden which the prophet Habakkuk saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry, and you will not hear? Even cry out to you violence, and you will not save. Why do you show me iniquity and cause me to see trouble? For plundering and violence are before me. There is strife and contention rises. Therefore the law is powerless, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous. Therefore perverse judgment proceeds.
Okay, so we're talking about these kings right here, right? Very wicked. You can see that in verses 1 through 4. Wicked, wicked leaders. Ken had brought up even the priesthood was corrupt at this time. When you have wicked, corrupt leaders, what happens to the country? You guys, it's just going to follow along, right? Now, there's going to be people who don't, but as a rule, it's going to go that way. And that's where we're at. And what was Habakkuk's expectation of God here?
He wanted,
Go ahead.
no, he wanted God to wipe them out.
Who?
The people, Syria.
Not yet.
Nineveh.
Because this is talking about Judah. This is talking about his own people.
No,
What was God?
He wants God to fix their political situation
When?
as soon as possible.
Yesterday, right? How long, oh God, are we going to do this? This should have been taken care of yesterday. God, I don't have a problem here, and I want you working on my timetable. Our nation's in trouble, and fix it on my timetable. What's the problem with that?
It's
No.
not God's timetable.
It's not God's timetable. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but you can just, I relate to Habakkuk, right? I trust God. I just have questions sometimes, and I'm like, God, come on. What are you doing up there? I need something. Now. Fix it. Help me. Yesterday. I can't wait till tomorrow. We can relate to Habakkuk. The problem is, let's take a deep breath. Let's remember God is God and I'm not. And he's going to take care of these things. We talked about that in Nahum. Let him be the one who takes vengeance. Let him be the one who's in control.
God accomplishes things because of consequences also. He's seen that the leadership of Judah, for the most part, is wicked. And, Habakkuk is wanting the righteous, the few righteous there, to receive justice.
Yeah.
But God looks at consequences and this is me. He sees the consequences and realize God knows that they have to suffer because of the consequences of having this bad leadership.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a while for these consequences to run their course.
Yeah. Just like a virus, got to run its course. It's got to run its course. You made me think of something when you said that. Was Habakkuk going to God with a bad thing or a sinful thing? Not at all. He was going to God with a really righteous request. He wanted justice. He wanted the righteous to continue to do good things. He wanted evil taken care of. That's not a bad thing. Got to remember that. He's not doing anything wrong. He's just got the wrong time frame. He's looking at it from the wrong perspective. Do you want to add anything else to that, Randy? Okay. So, all right, let's go to verses 5 through 11. Look among the nations. Now, this is God's response to him. Look among the nations. Observe. Exclamation point. There's a couple exclamation points. God's saying, just watch. Watch what happens, Habakkuk. I've got this under control. Be astonished, exclamation mark. Wonder, exclamation mark. I don't think those are there by accident. God is saying, I want you to really pay attention to what's going on and just wonder. Just sit back and be amazed, right? And when we sit back and look at our lives and see how things have gone, are we not amazed sometimes what God has done, or in countries, what things have happened? Because I am doing something in your days you would not believe if you were told. And God's going to tell him, for behold, I am rising up the Chaldeans, which is also the Babylonians. You can interchange those. That fierce and impetuous people who march throughout the earth to seize dwelling places which are not theirs. They are dreaded and feared. Their justice and authority originate with themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards and keener than wolves in the evening. Their horsemen come galloping. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like eagles, swooping down to devour. All of them come for violence. Their horde of faces moves forward. They collect captives like sand. They mock at kings. And rulers are a laughing matter to them. They laugh at every fortress and heap up rubble to capture it. Then they will sweep through like the wind and pass on, but they will be held guilty, they whose strength is their God. So you're Habakkuk, and you go to God and say, God, how long are the righteous going to have to endure this? What are we doing? And God tells you this. What's your reaction? What? You want to get your socks knocked off? Listen to that response. What do you think Habakkuk was expecting for a response? Just a speculation. What do you think?
He's going to give him some good news.
He was, I'm going to take care of this. All the righteous is going to be taken care of. He says, sit back and be amazed at what's going to happen. And I'm sure Habakkuk thought, man, I thought I was confused before. Now I really don't know what to do. I'm very confused.
It appears that God is actually rewarding the wicked in this case by permitting them to be unrestrained.
And we're going to get into that when Habakkuk responds to God's response now, coming up in a little bit. Absolutely. Be astonished. And I'm sure Habakkuk was astonished, and not a good way, in a very huh? Randy? What?
More than the very first verse you read there. For I'm doing a work in your days that you would not believe if you were told. This is going to work out, but you wouldn't believe it if I told you how it's going to work. And he's going to use these, and he proceeds to tell him he's going to use this nation that's vicious.
Yeah.
They're arrogant. They don't care about anybody but themselves. They rulers, kings mean nothing to us. That's who I'm using. Be astonished.
That's astonishing. Let's go back a little bit here. So who had they just been dealing with? Judah.
Assyrians.
They were dealing with the Assyrians, right? Not that long ago. And I'm sure Habakkuk's thinking, wait, what? Because Assyria caused a lot of trouble in Judah too. They conquered a lot of nations before they left town. They caused a lot of havoc there. Jerusalem was almost taken, except for a good king.
And don't forget that Egypt has just filled the void and are pulling the strings
Yeah, and you're right.
in Judah at this point.
I didn't even add Judah because Egypt was the one that put the second king in. All right, might as well do this the right way.
Sorry.
No, I'm glad you brought it up. Which way do I want to go, Ken? Here we go. This guy ruled for 3 months. This guy was put in by the Egyptian Pharaoh. So I didn't even put Egypt on that list. I could have. So there's a lot going on here. And Habakkuk's thinking, what? We just got rid of the Assyrians, and now we've got this coming along. Be careful what you ask for. Why? You might just get it, right, John? You might just get it. Habakkuk goes to God and says, we got to do something. God says, I'm going to do something. It's okay. Careful what you ask for, you might get it. In seriousness, though, when we go to God in prayer and ask him for something, what is he going to give us?
What he wants us to have.
What he wants us to have, what we need, not necessarily what we ask for. And we might go, what? Huh? We have to trust God, right? We have to remember God is God. I might not understand it, but God is God. He's going to work on his timetable. Okay. Let me get into where I'm at in my notes. So, Babylon is coming, right? Babylon is going to come and destroy Judah. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 24, because I want to just read some of the biblical account of Babylon destroying Judah. Someone get 2 Kings 24, 1 through 5. So this hasn't happened yet in Habakkuk's time. Habakkuk is saying this is going to come in the future. So we're going to kind of jump ahead in the story, and we're going to read about when that happens. I just want to get a feel for that, when the Babylonians come. So Habakkuk is telling that's going to happen. Now we're going to read about it in the future. 2 Kings 24, 1 through 5, please.
In his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his vassal for 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. And the Lord sent against him raiding bands of Chaldeans, bands of Syrians, bands of Moabites, and bands of the people of Ammon. He sent them against Judah to destroy it, according to the word of the Lord, which he had spoken by his servants and prophets. Surely the commandment of the Lord, this came upon Judah to remove them from his sight because of the sins of the Manasseh, according to all that he had done, and also because of the innocent blood that he had shed, where he had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, which the Lord would not pardon. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim and all that he did, or they are not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judea.
So this goes back to what Randy was saying. Sometimes the innocent have to endure the difficulties that are coming because of the sin, what was happening to the leadership. And here we have Nebuchadnezzar coming in, and he's going to take over the land. Someone read 10 through 16, please, of the same chapter. 2 Kings 24, 10 through 16.
At that time the servants of the Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came against the city, and his servants were besieging it. Then Jehoiakim, king of Judah, his mother, his servants, his princes, and his officers went out to the king of Babylon. And the king of Babylon, in the 8th year of his reign, took him prisoner.
Through 16.
And-
I'm sorry.
And he carried out from there all the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house. And he cut in pieces all the articles of gold which Solomon, king of Israel, had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. Also he carried into captivity all Jerusalem, all the captains and all the mighty men of valor, 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths. None remained except the poorest people of the land. And he carried Jehoiachin, king, captive to Babylon. The king's mother, the king's wives, his officers, and his mighty of all the lands he carried into captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon.
One more, please. Sorry.
And the violent men, 7,000, and craftsmen and smiths, 1,000, all who were strong and fit for war, these the king of Babylon brought captive to Babylon.
So you're Habakkuk, going to God. How long, O Lord? And God says, I'm going to take care of this. In his wildest dreams, do you think this is what Habakkuk expected? Not 1 second. There's no way Habakkuk could have ever thought this was going to happen. God says, you wouldn't believe it if I told you. Even after Habakkuk was told this, I'm sure he still didn't believe it. He still didn't understand it completely, because this is what's going to happen. We're going to strip the gold from the temple. We're going to take all these people captive. I want to read one more. Chapter 25 and verse 8. Now on the 7th day of the 5th month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, so this is a few years later, king of Babylon, that guy, the captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He burned the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Even every great house he burned with fire. So all the army of the Chaldeans who were with the captain of the guard broke down the walls around Jerusalem. Then the rest of the people who were left in the city, and the deserters who had deserted to the king of Babylon, and the rest of the people, Nebuzaradan, I butchered that, the captain of the guard, carried away into exile. But the captain of the guard left some of the poorest of the land to be vine dressers and plowmen. Now the bronze pillars which in the house of the Lord, and the stands and the bronze sea which were in the house of the Lord, the Chaldeans broke in pieces and carried the bronze to Babylon. They took away the pots, the shovels, the snuffers, the spoons, and all the bronze vessels which were used in the temple service, and on we could go. When Babylon got done with Jerusalem and Judah, what did it look like? Deserted farmland, wasteland, right? The farmland would have been, but everything was gone. I read all that to say, Habakkuk, if I'm going to tell, you wouldn't believe it if I told you, Habakkuk. And Habakkuk doesn't believe it because we're going to get into that later. What an amazing thing. God's ways are not our ways. God's wisdom is way above my wisdom. What's one of the other reasons they wouldn't believe it? I mean, he wouldn't believe that Babylon was coming, but why else would he not believe what he just read?
He wouldn't believe it. God would use an unrighteous people to bring justice against more justice.
We're going to get into that too. You're getting ahead. Just think about Habakkuk is saying, we're your chosen people, God. We're your special people. We're Abraham's descendants. We never do that to us, right? Wrong. Well, we go to the Church of Christ. On the day of judgment, I'm just going to walk right into heaven, right? You know? Not if I'm done doing this.
So we don't truly believe that suffering is the way to salvation. We don't want to.
We do not want that, right? We do not want that. We don't want to suffer. We don't want difficulties. But sometimes suffering is part of the way we're going to get there, unfortunately. It is sad, but that is the way it is. The Judeans should be remembering something that happened to their northern brothers, Israel, right? God will let Assyria come in and just wipe them off completely. They should remember that. But they're not going to believe this is going to happen to them. So let's go back to Habakkuk chapter 1, and we are in verse 5. Yes, I'm sorry.
I also see a warning for us as Americans, because we think, we're the same kind of high mind. We're Americans, we're God's nation, we think. But
Yeah.
we also constantly pray for the wickedness that's in this nation to be overcome. Maybe the answer for that is that America falls and isn't what it is today. And whatever it is, we need to be ready to still be righteous, be the remnant that's left.
Absolutely. We're going to serve God no matter what happens, right? We're going to be God's family. We're going to be his followers.
Just like every time God's people, they got subjected and everything, that's when they turn to him. When things go bad for us, that's often, when we turn to God. If you're taking down your knees, you might as well pray.
9/11. I always think 9/11 when that was the case. Our country was brought to its knees. We had a lot of really God-believing people at that time. And we need to remember, Heather brings up a good point. Just because we're Americans, we're high and mighty, doesn't mean we're going to be here forever. Let's learn the lesson from Habakkuk that that's not always the case. And that's okay, right? I love America. I don't want anything to happen. The freedoms we enjoy are fantastic. But what's more important? Our citizenship in heaven is more important than any citizenship we have on this earth. So does this phrase sound familiar? I'm doing something in your days you would not believe if you were told. I'm going to be honest, I never made this connection. I don't know why. But this is a New Testament. The Apostle Paul uses this phrase 3 times in the New Testament.
Coming of the Messiah.
Coming of the Messiah, right? Let's go read a few of these. Let's go to, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is used in Acts 13. I got all this in my mind that I got mixed up. The next phrase we get to in the next chapter is used 3 times. This is used once. Acts chapter 13. Acts chapter 13 and verse 40. Paul's on his first missionary journey, right, with his companions. He is in a synagogue teaching to the Jewish people. And in chapter 13, he goes through this history of Israel, kind of a brief history of what happened to them. And he comes to the point that Ken just brought up is the Messiah. He comes to the point of the Messiah. Let's look at verse 32 of Acts 13. And we preach to you the good news of the promise made to the fathers, that God has fulfilled with promise to our children, and that he raised up Jesus, as is also written in the 2nd Psalm, you are my son, today I have begotten you. As for the fact that he raised him up from the dead, no longer to return to decay, he has spoken in this way, I will give you the holy and sure blessings of David. Therefore he also says in another psalm, you will not allow your Holy One to undergo decay. For David, after he served the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep and was laid among his fathers and underwent decay. But he whom God raised did not undergo decay. Therefore, let it be known to you, brethren, that through him forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. And through him everyone who believes is freed from all things from which you could not be freed through the law of Moses. That wouldn't go over well in the synagogue, right? I mean, that would not be. The very ones who crucified Jesus. Verse 40, therefore take heed so that the things spoken of in the prophets may not come upon you. Behold, you scoffers, and marvel and perish, for I am accomplishing a work in your days, a work in which you would never believe that someone should describe it to you. So Paul uses this phrase from Habakkuk, from chapter 1, verse 5. You wouldn't believe it if it was told. The Jewish people could have never imagined this. We're studying John on Wednesday, right? Who just came to Jesus and said, I know you come from God. How can these things be? Nicodemus, right? This just made me think of Nicodemus as soon as I read that. They wouldn't believe it if they were told.
I think you're spot on. I think the first astounding thing is that they were expecting a prophet, a Messiah. They were not expecting God's son. I think that would blow your mind as a Jew.
Yeah.
And secondly, oh, by the way, he's a humble servant, not a conquering military leader.
He's riding on a donkey, not a stallion. He's wiping people's feet as a slave would, not being served as a king would be. And what else? What's the big thing that they expected as their Messiah?
Restore the kingdom of Israel.
We're not going to physically restore the kingdom of Israel, right? That's not even what they wouldn't believe it if they were told. And Paul warns them, don't be like the people in Habakkuk's time, that you wouldn't believe it if you were told. I've just told you, now you better believe it.
Also, the fall of Jerusalem was coming, and they're going to be caught off guard on that one.
Yeah, coming real quick, right? I mean, you wouldn't believe it if I told you. You know, that kind of thing is just amazing how Paul uses that similarity in Jesus. Because if I was going to write a book as the Savior for the world, it wouldn't be Jesus' story. I can promise you that.
Later, on page 16 in this book,
Okay, page 16 in our workbook, if you couldn't hear.
middle column, the first part there.
Middle column, first part, okay.
At the top, it says, though the terrible and mighty nation of Babylon is being brought by God to punish the evil in Judah, the just will always be safe when he lives by faith. He has confidence in God's faithfulness through any adversity. He's not saying that trouble's going to come. He's not saying that you might not physically be hurt. He's not saying that you might die. He's saying you're going to be safe. And we have to resolve in our head how we're going to be safe even if we die. And that's something that Habakkuk hasn't figured out.
Yeah.
And God's answering him, you're going to be safe. You know, if we die in the Lord, we're safe.
It's okay.
We don't want to think, somebody said that earlier, we don't want to think to that degree. But that's the reality of it.
So how many people died when Babylon invaded? We don't know. A lot, right? How many people died in Babylonian captivity for those 70 years? I don't know. A lot.
How many of those were righteous?
Exactly. That's my point. Those righteous people died. But God says it's okay. It's not a problem. The problem is we have to make sure we're thinking spiritually, not physically, right? I mean, that's where you're going with this. Absolutely. It's okay. The righteous are going to suffer, and they might die, but they're going to go be in heaven forever. So who cares?
Some things never change like the unjust back then and the unjust now. People think, well, when we die, that's it, and there's nothing else.
Yeah.
And that's how they thought back then.
That's a horrible way to live, right? Not expecting anything after this life. Go ahead, Paul.
Let's do a little bit of history here.
Okay.
There was 4 great powers, and it was predicted of them 4 great powers that the stone would roll and come down, and the 4 great powers was Babylonians, Chaldean, Medo-Persians, Greeks, and Romans.
So that's from Daniel, right? We're talking about the prophecy from Daniel.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, go ahead.
And they would prophesy when each one of these powerful nations was going to fall. There were 4 of them. And it was also prophesied that during the last one, Christ would come.
Yeah.
So this
And it's like God saying, I have a plan, but you wouldn't believe it if I told you. Like, there's no way we could wrap our minds around 4 nations, world nations coming along, and at the exact right time during that last one, God's going to send his son to be the savior of all men, not just the Jews, but the Greeks as well. And Paul says, you wouldn't believe it if I told you. But you better believe it because I'm telling you and you need to understand it. Were you going to add anything else?
Because the Romans was probably the most powerful of all the nations. I mean the Babylonians, I'm sorry. The Babylonians was the most powerful of all four.
I don't know that, but they had a lot of power. They were definitely a world power. They had a huge kingdom, you know, and they were wicked, evil.
Because when it was prophesied, it's, you know, it was like explaining of a human man.
Yeah,
And the Babylonians was the head.
yeah, and then the feet, everything. You're exactly right. So we just need to wrap our minds around that. God has a plan. And we're lucky enough to sit on this side of Scripture. We can kind of see the plan. It's still unbelievable to me, you know, that when you think about it. But God had a plan. His plan went perfect, just as he wanted it to. And Jesus came. And that was the whole point.
You know, we talk about consequences. It's not the consequences that if you sin, there might be consequences that affect me.
Yeah.
And so the wicked people in Judah, their consequences fell on the righteous. Okay? The same way with the Assyrians, there were consequences of their action. God made them pay. Well, now we're finding out Babylon, there's going to be consequences of what they're doing. They're going to affect the righteous and they're going to affect the unrighteous in Judah. So consequences have fallout effect on a lot of other people sometimes than just the people that had the sin.
And the righteous say, how long, oh God? Why? Why is this happening? God lets us be free moral agents, right? He let the Babylonians do what they wanted, and he used that for his plan. Amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, Ken.
I love Paul's point about being Babylon and their military might, but yet look, their confidence was in a single man. And when the Medes come in and took the kingdom and killed the king or carried him off,
A few years later.
Well, all right, big deal. New sheriff in town.
Yeah.
You know, had they been loyal to the nation, to their king, they might have resisted, and the Medes would have not succeeded.
Right.
So, take heart. We have the greatest king. We talk about the nation will never be destroyed. Loyalty to the king will cause us to fight for and preserve the kingdom.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Very good. Okay, so Paul uses this idea of, you know, you wouldn't believe it if I told you in Acts chapter 13. And verses 6 through 11 are basically describing how terrible they were. God was rising them up, right? They were getting stronger because God allowed it to happen. They thought they were getting stronger because of how great they were. God says, I am raising up the Chaldeans. And they didn't remember that. Nebuchadnezzar had to eat like a cow in the field before he came to his senses. Different story, different time. But they thought they were doing this great thing, but it was God who was in control. And how are they described? In verse 6.
Bitter and a nasty nation.
Nasty. Nasty is a good word. Horrible. Fierce. Conquerors of the world. They're going to go through and just wipe things out. They're going to conquer the known world at that time. They are dreaded in verse 7. They are feared. And their justice and authority originate with themselves. Who did they answer to? I'm sorry?
Nobody.
Themselves. That reminds me of America today, too. We don't think we need to answer to anybody. We think we can establish our own role. Even individually. Oh, well, you know, there's circumstances, so I don't have to really answer to anybody else. I'll do whatever I want because it's what I want. That's a very scary place to be in when you are answering to yourselves. They make up their own rules. And that's who God chose to punish Judah. And that's why Habakkuk's got to be like, I'm not sure this is good. In verse 8, their army is fast. They're like leopards. They're smart like wolves. They say wolves are one of the smartest predators in the world in what they're able to do. And they are never satisfied, right? A pack of wolves can kill an elk today, and they'll kill 2 more tomorrow, and they'll kill 3 more the next. They're never satisfied. Wolves are smart, and they are never satisfied with what they kill. Eagles, fast, accurate. You know, I love to see the film where the eagle comes flying down on the river and takes the trout right out of there. Fast and accurate. That's the way they are. They travel far and wide. It doesn't matter how far they have to go to kill somebody, they're going to go. The Babylonians don't care. If we looked at the map, we can look at the map again since I took the time. You know, they're going to go from here and they're going to go all the way over here. They don't care how far they have to go. They're going to conquer the world. And that's their objective in their life. In verse 9, they are not coming on a peace mission. They're not sending their ambassadors to say, hey, you know what, maybe we can work out a little deal. No, they're coming to kill you. They're coming to wipe you off the face of the earth as quickly as possible. They move forward and they don't look back. They just keep moving forward. They're not pushed back. They don't look back. They just keep going. Someone read that from a different translation. Verse 9. Maybe New King James. Does anyone have New King James?
They all come for violence. Their faces are set like the east wind. They gather captives like sand.
The east wind, that's what I was thinking of. What was the east wind like in the Middle East?
Harsh.
It was very harsh. It destroyed everything. Tore crops up. They dreaded that thought because after the east wind came through, it was dry. It just destroyed everything. They were in big trouble. He basically says, they're coming like the east wind. They're going to destroy everything. When the east wind passes through, destruction and devastation lies in its wake. Captives are uncountable. They're like the sand of the seashore. I'm sure many of you go to the beach and you go and you get in the car, then you go in the house. And you're like, where does this sand come from? I'm tired of it. It just never stops, right? And he's saying, those captives are like the sand of the, you can't count them. They're going to have so many captives that they're going to be everywhere. You can't even count them. In verse 10, he says, they mock at kings. Our president, the President of the United States, not just Trump, but they always say he's the most powerful man in the world, right? That's what they say about the American president. He could, if he wanted to, just destroy any nation in this world in a matter of pushing a button. I kind of think that's what they mock at them. Like, what are they going to do to me? What's Mexico going to do to President Trump? They mock at them. They can't do anything to me. I'm too powerful. I'm too strong. Their rulers are a laughing matter to them. They laugh at every fortress. It makes me think of when Nineveh was destroyed. And he says, are you any better than that Egyptian city that was unbeatable, unbreakable? Babylon looks at every city like, that's just another blip on the radar. We can take that over.
It's also that they didn't have the respect of the current regime. A lot of these nations, especially if they were far away from the center of power, would allow a regent to stay there or somebody that, okay, we have an agreement with your government, you stay there for a while, but we, pay tribute to us. Babylon's just like, no, everybody's gone.
You're done. We don't care who you are. We don't care what king you are. You're done. What ruler you are finished. Vicious, fierce people. They laugh at every fortress. They heap up rubble to capture it. When I read that, I can almost imagine the rubble from the city before, they just use it to build a little ramp to go into the next city. Or they use the rubble from this city just to go on and conquer. There's just nothing but left. Just rubble, rocks on top of rocks when they get done with these people. What did the Assyrians do as they conquered people?
Spread them out through the land.
They just mixed them like a mixing pot. We'll take you, put you here, we'll put you here, you put you here. What did the Babylonians do? They took them captive or killed them, right? There was no mixing them up. So the land was basically rubble and deserted farmland. The poorest of the poor were left to do something. It's amazing what they did. No fortress, no wall, no city strong enough to stop them. That's a scary thought. Go ahead, Randy.
The king of Egypt that sent Jehoiakim, one of those charts that
Mm-hmm.
he had,
Yeah.
he sent the king up over Israel. Okay, he lost in a battle to Nebuchadnezzar and expanded Babylon's rule even down into Egypt.
Correct.
Okay, so that's one of the examples. At kings they scoff, at princes they laugh. There's a prime example of something that was done by them early on in his reign.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was no stopping them. And I can just imagine Habakkuk, hearing this, reading it 2 or 3 times, like, hold on, wait, what? Or not reading it, but hearing it, like playing it over in his mind 2 or 3 times. That's not what I wanted. God, that's not what I wanted you to say. But God says that's what you're going to get. Okay, we have to stop there. We're going to start in verse 11 next time. Habakkuk, I tell you, every time I study something in depth, I become my new hero. Habakkuk is my new hero, biblical hero. Thank you for your participation and putting up with my nonsense with all these slides this morning.